Hey, it's Carlton French. Welcome back to this week's episode of the Single Man Podcast. I am joined this week with my good friend, Brad Barco. Brad, how are you doing today, man?
It has been a phenomenal day. I dated one girl in high school, go on dates here and there throughout college, but I just never worked out for whatever reason. I think the biggest thing for me is intentionality. When we hear the term on fire, I want to be there and my eyebrows are getting singed. She is so on fire for the Lord, and we match together, we vibe together on a regular basis. Are you a part of the lifeblood of your church? Are you present? If God says, hey, I need you to be single, whether that is permanently for a long period of time, you need to really dive deep and be like, okay, God, where do I need to be? At the end of the day, nothing is guaranteed. We really need to be pursuing the things of God and being eternity minded first. I'm waiting for marriage to have sex because I want that relationship to be strictly between me and her. My future wife absolutely deserves that. She expects me to be the leader of the household, and how can she trust me later if she can't trust me now?
Challenge yourself constantly.
You have to be a little bit patient.
I felt like I was in a hole looking up.
The whole idea is you have to become content in singleness.
I'd be lying if I said I haven't fired off some Instagram DMs.
The word dating is not mentioned in the Bible.
I dedicated my life at Tomorrow World to Jesus.
Welcome to the Single Man Podcast, where we delve into candid conversations with Christian men about their journey to faith, advice for their younger selves, and navigating dating. With a heart to reach men from all walks of life, dive into real stories of redemption, growth, and the hope found in following Jesus. I'm your host, Carlton French, a 29-year-old single Christian, and I'm excited for you to listen to this week's episode. Let's jump into it. Hey, it's Carlton French. Welcome back to this week's episode of the Single Man Podcast. I am joined this week with my good friend, Brad Barco. Brad, how are you doing today, man?
It has been a phenomenal day, Carlton.
Yeah, I love it. What's been phenomenal about it?
Man, I've got to spend all this time with you and just hang out and catch up with you.
Yep.
Is always a way to brighten your day.
Okay, well, that's very kind of you. I appreciate you coming over, Brad, and being on the podcast today. I've been encouraged by your friendship the last 2 years of knowing you through our men's Bible study here in Atlanta, Georgia, and I think it's really unique about your story, how just like this joy and encouragement that you always have, and you've always been someone that's just always positive. And so as I've gotten to know you more and learn more about your story, how you're 27 and single and navigating dating and relationships, the audience is going to really benefit from hearing more about your story today. So honored that you'll come on and share.
So pumped to be here.
I love it. Okay, so a little bit about Brad. He is originally from Cleveland, Ohio, and he is now in Cumming, Georgia, and has kind of grown up in the Atlanta area most of his life. You now work in IT, which is awesome. And some of your hobbies, you were telling me you're a big Atlanta Braves fan. You're a season ticket holder for the Atlanta Braves. And you also love going to concerts, specifically rock and metal concerts. Is that right?
Oh, that is 100% correct.
Yeah, I love it. What's been your favorite concert of the last year?
Man, you are asking the tough questions right out of the gate. I would say probably my favorite concert in a recent mind it probably wasn't the craziest thing ever, but there is a band called Saint Asonia that toured here on Valentine's Day in Atlanta, and it was a small, super intimate show of the singer. He used to be a part of a band called 3 Days Grace, and 3 Days Grace was a massive part of forming my taste in music. So to see an intimate show like that was so much fun.
Okay. Wow, that's awesome. Yeah, I love it. And you've been talking to me for a while about going to see a concert with you, so maybe we'll make that happen here soon.
Hey, when it happens, we'll edit in some highlights.
Yeah, okay. I love it. And this last week, Brad, what's been going on? What's been like a high and a low of life so people can get to know you a little bit more?
Yeah, man, it's been really, really an incredible week. funny enough, it really hasn't been a super, super busy week. For me, I'm somebody who likes to do stuff just about every single day after work. But luckily, over the past couple days, I've had some slow days, and I was able to get dinner with family and just take it easy and relax and catch up on life.
Yeah. Okay. That's great. And then any lows been happening?
Nothing super major, but if you tied my hands and told me to say something, we got to talk about those Atlanta Braves performances. Oh boy, it's been testing testing my fandom, but you know what? We're here till the ship sinks.
Yeah, right. I mean, we had some great years the last couple of years, right? So we'll see how.
Hey, I'm good. I'm good. They got me a World Series in 21. I waited 20 years for the first one. I can wait another 20 years for the second one.
Yeah, right. Just a good test in patience, maybe.
Hey, we all need that.
Love it. Awesome, Brad. So for people who are listening that don't know you, would love for you to share a little bit about your story, kind of what did it look like growing up in Cleveland, come in Georgia, and at what point did you come to know Jesus through all that?
Yeah, so I was born in Cleveland, and my family moved down in 2001. So most of the memories that I have in Cleveland are just small, little, vague ones. And it was when I started going to preschool, and kindergarten was all in coming. So my family grew up in church, so I had always been a part of the lifeblood of just going through church and seeing why Jesus is important. It started to come around middle school where I started to feel like something wasn't right. People were starting to act a little bit more angry, edgy. They'll start cursing more, and I'm like, what's going on here? And then it was come high school in my small group where I had a group leader who, to this day, had such a massive impact in my life. His name was Mr. Cam, and he was probably in his 70s at the time. And he was just a wellspring of wisdom and knowledge, and really kind of shaped the idea of what it meant to be a man of God. And moving past that, went to college. First year really was searching for a community, never could really find it. And then that's when I became a part of the BCM shortly thereafter. I was invited by somebody who went to my home church and invited me to come to the BCM.
What's the BCM for people that maybe don't know what that is?
So the BCM is what stands for the Baptist Collegiate Ministries, and it is a campus ministry backed by the Southern Mission Board. So super awesome, super phenomenal place. Through there is when I learned to get involved and be a part of a community, and eventually that led to student leading opportunities, and I was able to be a student leader at the BCM for 2 years thereafter before I graduated.
Okay. Yeah, that's great. And so going back to when you were a kid, it was just like your parents always took you to church or something like that?
Yep,
or?
it was every Sunday, go to church. Started out at one church from like, I would say probably elementary to middle school, and then we shifted churches, and then that other church is where I met Mr. Cam, and he was able to kind of impart that wisdom in my life.
Yeah. So was it your parents that kind of taught you, or going to church? Did they teach you about Jesus or Mr. Cam, or at what point were you like actually understanding who Jesus was and you wanted to kind of do it on your own as opposed to just my parents raised me doing this?
I would say I always had that desire, and that like growing up, it was like you'd say the prayer and the preschool church and be like, oh yeah. But it really wasn't until that 11th grade where Mr. Cam kind of really broke it down to being accountable to your sins and being accountable why we really need Jesus. And like it was at that moment where it really faith became less of a, oh yes, I believe because it's I'm loved. It's more like because it's you have to take accountability for that love, and it's like that love that was provided wasn't free for us.
Okay. So that was explained to you in 11th grade?
Yes.
Okay. And then that's when you like understood what Jesus did for you.
Correct. And I started to understand, I would say I'd describe it as I understood the weight of my sins for the first time. Instead of just being it's there. It's like, there is a consequence in eternity.
Oh, okay. So did you put your faith in Jesus at that point, or like get baptized, or what was that kind of like?
Honestly, I couldn't tell you when the faith in Jesus part came, because I did grow up in the church, but
Yeah.
I do know it was in that, in it wasn't even a specific point. It was just throughout the year. I just had somebody who was really defining what a man of God is. And it was from that point forward, it was like, I need to get serious about this.
Okay. So then you go to college and you get plugged in with the BCM, the Baptist Collegiate Ministries. And what was that experience like? You said you kind of got community and started leading some stuff through that?
Yeah, man, it was the most important event in my life was getting involved there at the time.
Yeah.
Because my first time at the BCM, I was picked up and shrouded by just a community that just throughout all the way loved you. And it was really a first experience of like practical discipleship where we had older leaders pouring into my life, giving me advice when I needed it, and kind of helping guide us through. And I mean, the community was incredible. I felt like I belonged. I felt like I was there. And I felt so loved.
Yeah.
And I felt the calling of God to say, hey, I want you to step up and be a student leader. So I'm like, okay, we'll take that on. So I started out as the communications team lead. I applied and I got that. And that was basically like help run the social media, help making sure events are announced on campus. It also had responsibilities of like leading a breakout group after the BCM was done for the night.
Okay. And what year did you start that?
That would have been technically it was my senior year, because I also had another year as a super senior.
Okay.
So it was the senior year there, and then going into the super senior year, I took on the role of lead student outreach. And it ended up turning into another thing where I ended up becoming the president of the BCM for that year as well.
Okay. Wow. Cool. So you were in the position to where you were leading a group of people that were underneath you or something like that?
Correct. I would say under my time as president, my main goal was to teach student leaders how to lead and kind of help set the course of the BCM for that year, and how we want to take it and how we want to lead, what our mission statement was, things of that nature.
Yeah. Okay. Awesome. And then you graduate. What does it kind of look like following Jesus since you graduated?
Man, it was a real test. I graduated during the COVID pandemic, and anything that was promised about jobs and opportunities in IT just were not there. So I had to work full time at a grocery store until the start of 2021. And at the time, I knew my home church from school was not the end all be all, and I was starting to be led towards Passion City, and God doing some awesome things arranged it where I got a job in Buckhead, and I was able to get involved with a small group that was based in Atlantic Station, and that was my first time getting involved and getting into the lifeblood of being a part of a small group here at Passion City.
Okay. How did you even know about Passion City?
So another crazy story that leads back to the BCM was there was a sister branch of the BCM up at University of Northern Georgia, and we have a yearly conference for BCM where all the BCMs go down to one church and they spend the weekend there.
Yeah.
And our BCM branch was staying at a local church with the same people as Northern Georgia. So we all became quick friends because we're like, oh, we get to hang out we don't know you, we get to hang out for the entire weekend.
Right.
And they're like, hey, we're thinking about coming back and going to Passion City. And I was like, ooh, big church like that? I don't know about that one.
Yeah.
And I put my foot in my mouth, like, okay, we'll go. Another reason why I had at the time, there was a freshman who is now a great friend of mine. Shout out Tommy. He's like, oh yeah, I'm gonna go to Passion by myself, and I'm like, no, you're not. So me and him started attending the 5 p.m. service on a regular basis.
Okay.
And that's kind of how what got the wheels kicking, was those couple events right there.
Gotcha. Okay. That's awesome. So now you're 27. How long have you been at Passion?
I have been, I would say, the first time I went was the fall of 2019, and it wasn't until early 2020 after Passion conferences where I was like, okay, this is the place I want to go. And the reason for that was the experience I had at the BCM really transformed my heart to have a servant's heart, and I wanted a place to continue to serve young adults. And after seeing Passion 2020, I'm like, this is the place where I can serve young adults.
Yeah. Okay. That's awesome. And, now being 27, if you could like look back on your earlier 20s, is there anything that you would tell your younger self? Like, okay, I wish I could do this differently, or, anything that you would advise them to maybe avoid some pitfalls?
Oh, yeah. Past Brad did some pretty dumb things when it comes to, especially in the dating realm. Something that I've come to learn in time, and something that I still will continue to struggle with, is like trusting God with your future.
Yeah.
It wasn't until recently, and I had a little moment where I was like, what's going on? And I saw Louis Giglio had posted something on Instagram and says, do you trust God with your future? And I'm like, I'm not doing that right now. And that's something that I did a lot back then, was like, I was like, okay, I found this girl, and I'm like, I'm going to pursue her relentlessly, and just never, and it was never meant to be. And I would always hold on to that. I would always grip to those straws, and I'd be like, why? And it's like, and I've come to realize that God's plan is perfect for my life, and and I'm getting to the point now in my life where it's like, hey, if I need to be single for as long as I need to be, God's got me covered.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. That's great. Great maturity, I guess, that you've come to learn the last couple of years. And you talked about specifically with dating. That's the area you'd give yourself the most advice.
Oh, absolutely.
So what's it kind of been like your dating history or kind of story to this point?
So I don't have the craziest dating stories.
Yeah.
I dated one girl in high school, the only girl that I have ever dated. And then it's just a matter of like, I'd go on dates here and there throughout college and my young adulthood, but I just never worked out for whatever reason. Either like I said, me being headstrong and not giving up at the right time, or whatever that case might be.
Okay. Gotcha. And since the girl that you dated in high school, what does it look like pursuing girls as a Christian?
I think the biggest thing for me is intentionality, and making sure checking off boxes is not something that I think is the right term for it, but I think there's something that I look for is a very healthy relationship with the Lord. And I mean, like, when I mean healthy, I'm like, when we hear the term on fire, like, I want to be there and my eyebrows are getting singed because she is so on fire for the Lord. And I think that's really like looking for that, and
Yeah.
and we match together, we vibe together, like, and then being intentional about pursuing it and not being beating around the bush of, hey, let's hang out. It's like, hey, no, I want to take you on a date.
Okay. What do you think, or girls that you've interacted with, women in the past, have there been any that have like singed your eyebrows? Or
There've been a couple that are like, and that's really how I get interested, is that like,
Yeah.
I see that fire, I see that spark. If that spark and fire is not there, I'm just not going to become interested, because the just being on fire for the Lord and dedicating your life to the Lord is the most important thing. And like, to me, everything else is just, it's there. And I mean, like, and it's like, I can work with anything and anybody, because I love seeing people, I love hearing people for who they are. And like,
Yeah.
even if we don't have anything in common, that means it's exciting for me because I get to learn about your new hobbies and learn new things from you. And it's like we continue to grow in that versus like, well, there are not too many Christian girls who are into heavy metal. Well, speaking from experience here.
Really?
Just a little bit.
Nice. Okay. So from girls that you have seen or girls that maybe you'd be looking to pursue in the future, practically speaking, what should guys maybe be looking for that can tell them, okay, this girl is like really on fire?
I would say there's probably about 3 trademarks. As we stated, the just being on fire for the Lord.
Yeah.
But let's break that down on what that kind of looks like.
Yeah.
I think it's going to be, are you consistently showing up in church every Sunday? Now, I know we're all busy and we're all practical, but on a regular basis, are you being there? Are you a part of the lifeblood of your church? Are you present? And I think the next step to maturity is understanding that Jesus was the ultimate servant, and we are called to follow into his footsteps. And I think that is serving others. And serving others is a very, like that leads to that fire. Like you're building yourself up as a big bonfire like that because you started to realize that life is not all about you, and it's all about others. And like, are you sacrificing your time to come in to another service early, or are you serving in another way? Are you leading students? Are you leading kids? It's like stuff like that. And I think also another thing, another very important thing, and something that we know very familiar about, is community.
Yeah.
Is, are you seen by your church? Are you involved? Are you plugged in? Or do you have people that you can go to and talk about? I think dynamics like this are very important because when you're dating somebody and it leads to marriage, you're not always going to have, like, a man of God and a woman of God are built very differently. And sometimes as a man, I need to go seek out counsel of another wiser man, how to handle things, or if a situation arises, and I don't know what to do, sometimes it's better to seek my community, ask their advice, then come back, and they need to do the same. And because I can't tell you how to be a woman of God. I'm not designed like that. And that's when we can come together. And that's why, for me, that dating is the pursuit of intentionally dating. And there are times that we're going to need to go seek others for advice because we're not going to be able to see eye to eye right away.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. I love that. I love the breakdown of what to look for there. The fire and plugged in at church, serving, and in community. That's awesome. What would you say in terms of kind of like the idea of being single? You know, like you haven't dated anyone, like been boyfriend, girlfriend since high school, you said. Has that been hard at times? Like, okay, you know, I'm 27, like there's no one out there, or do you have hope? I know you talked about, you know, trusting God with your future as it comes to dating.
I think really for me is that it would be a lie to tell you if I don't struggle with it at times. But on the other hand, too, it has been an incredible thing, especially as a young adult, where I have the freedom to set my day, do what I want with my day, and pursue my passions and pursue who really God created me to be. Ultimately, being single has refined me to be who he wants me to be. It's really an incredible thing.
Yeah.
Because when I am dating somebody, my priorities are going to be shifted. It's not always going to be about me and about what I want to do.
Yeah.
It's going to be seeing them for who they are and being there with them. So, like, for me, like, if I want to go to 3 Braves games in a week, and then I want to follow it up with 2 concerts the next week, I don't have to worry about that. And having that freedom to pursue those passions, those God-given passions, is an incredible thing. Because as the Great Commission states, it's like, go to the ends of the earth and make disciples of disciples. And it's like, I have the freedom to do that and be able to pour into others and just be a part of other people's lives that I would not have the opportunity to do because I have a wide open schedule.
Right.
And to me, that is the most satisfying thing, is that I get to be who God created me to be. Now, something I will say, if you are not at the point where you are strong enough in your faith to be like, if God says, hey, I need you to be single, whether that is permanently for a long period of time, then you need to really kind of dive deep and be like, okay, God, where do I need to be? Because at the end of the day, our time on earth could be 20 years, it could be 50 years, it could be 100 years.
Yeah.
Nothing is guaranteed. And we really need to be pursuing the things of God and being eternity minded first and foremost.
Yeah, that's great. Do you think if God told you or you felt led to be single forever, you could actually do that?
I'd be kicking and screaming, but I would totally do it. Because I mean, for me, I would have the desire to be a father one day, raise kids, and help them go through it. But I mean, if God's got other plans, I mean, most importantly, when my life is done, I want to return to heaven and say, "Welcome home, good and faithful servant." And that's really the most important thing, is that, like, when that being on fire for the Lord and seeing that fire in somebody else is realizing that we're secondary to the Lord and his love for us. And that is, to me, ultimately living my life for God. It takes a precedent over any dating life or any marriage that I could ever be a part of.
Yeah. That's great. I think people listening, both men and women, they'd be interested to hear, how do you yourself, Brad, try to determine if God's telling you to be single or, to pursue somebody? Like, what does that kind of look like, or how have you done it in the past?
I think God calls us to different seasons of life. And I think it's like when you are involved in her, what opportunities are coming your way? Do you have the opportunity to serve people in a unique way? And I think once God has that, if you're having that trust that God, if he does want you to be dating somebody, will bring that right person along. I think Ben Stewart had a sermon once. He said, we all run races, and we so happen to run that same race at the same time, then it's going to happen. And just being like, God's not going to let you down. There's so much scripture that backs up that how much God loves you, how his timing is perfect, and how much he is going to take care of you no matter what. He's going to prosper you. And it's not about trying to fight yourself out of this season. It's about being faithful in this season and being like, I haven't dated since high school, but I have lived some of the most fulfilling years of my life because God has blessed me with those.
Yeah. I think, speaking about your story specifically, I think women would be encouraged, maybe like, okay, you haven't dated, maybe you've been waiting for your wife, right? Like, you're not out going on dates with all different people, and you have all this past, maybe, experience with dating and relationships that can be seen as baggage potentially, in a relationship, or things that you're having to heal from. Like, you have been able to avoid that in a way.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately for me, like, think about dating like now is like getting prepared for your future wife. I mean, I never want to have the conversation with my future wife of how badly I screwed up or how badly something went wrong. It's like, for me, like you said, I'm waiting for marriage to have sex, and because I want that relationship to be strictly between me and her.
Yeah.
And I think my future wife absolutely deserves that because she expects me to be the leader of the household, and how can she trust me later if she can't trust me now?
Yeah.
She may not even know me, but it is, for me, living for that future woman.
That's great. Yeah, thank you for being vulnerable and sharing that. So, last question on dating. I'm curious, what would your thoughts be, as someone that's waiting until you're married? Would you date a girl that wasn't waiting until marriage, or like had that kind of in her past, or what would your thoughts be around that?
Man, that's a tough question, because I think it really is really getting to know this person and really hearing their story, really hearing their circumstances, and like where is your relationship with the Lord now? And understanding that there's not always a simple answer in life. Relationships are tough. Friendships are tough too. It's like you can say one thing wrong and it gets interpreted the wrong way. And it's like really understanding to get to know them and understanding their heart behind it and understanding where they've come from. And remember, extending grace, because neither of us are perfect either. I mean, we're all going to make mistakes in life, and not to say that a past relationship is a mistake, but there are different circumstances that lead you to this place where maybe you were manipulated, or maybe, God forbid, something even more devious occurred.
Yeah, right. And I think one thing also, like for me in my story, having previously had sex, is I didn't really know what I was doing, I feel like, was a sin before I had the understanding of who Jesus was and what he did for me. And so I think being able to show almost like a track record, or like how your heart has changed on the subject, if that is something that someone has done in the past, has had sex, or, living in sexual sin, like what's been different about your life now and how you're free from that. I think that is a great way to, evaluate something like that. So
I think it's having compassion and letting their life speak for itself.
yeah,
Are you following into the same trappings that you once were when you were in that season?
right.
And it's like, are you overcoming it? Have you surrendered that life part and that past to the Lord? And have you moved forward with it? And are you become the man of God or the woman of God you are supposed to be?
Right. Yeah, that's awesome, Brad. I want to ask you, speaking about seasons of life, do you have a Bible verse that God's been like teaching you recently, or putting on your heart, or just for your life in general, anything that kind of sticks out?
So funny enough, most people are going to hit you with something a little inspiring, but
Yeah.
recently the Lord has decided that he has picked a
Revelation.
That is also a good one. But we are looking in Lamentations and Judges.
Okay.
And it is, man, it's crazy. Like,
yeah.
it is
Wars
like
and just
wars. It is like what happens when you turn your back to the Lord.
Mm-hmm.
And I sit here and I'm like, whoo, buddy, I ain't turning on you anytime soon. No siree.
Yeah.
And I think it's just, for me, it's a speaking to it. It's like, continue to be faithful and do not stray from the path, and like knowing that God is faithful and he has a plan. Like the book of Judges, like you get so much lineage of the different judges, and it's like you're following years and years and years of stories and like hearing that and like in the consequences of not following the Lord.
Right. Right. Yeah. That's cool. Why are you in the Old Testament? And you just like felt led to read that right now?
You know what? I just played Bible roulette on my iPad. I just picked the books and I was like, and I'm like, Lamentations. I haven't done that in a minute.
Okay.
I don't know. Actually, I don't even know if I've ever like practically sat down and read Lamentations before like this.
Yeah.
I probably heard sermons here and there and like little Bible verses, but like
Right.
to really see it all and be like, ooh.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, so people that are listening, shouldn't be intimidated of the Old Testament. There's a lot of great wisdom and stories in there, and just seeing how the path of kind of the Israelites and kind of how they would trust God and then turn away from God, and then, okay, we need you again, God, and then he would send a judge to help them. Like, yeah, really interesting stuff there.
Yeah, I'd say be bold if you have always just kind of strayed away from the Old Testament, because it's included in the Bible for a reason. Like there are so many prophecies and so many times of God being faithful and seeing his promises, even all the way back in the Old Testament. It's like if you only read the 50% of the New Testament, it's like you're not getting the second half. Like I guess technically the first half. The first half is what completes the second half, and like you can see that God promised us so much in the Old Testament. And like for me, it's like I've always posed the question of like I could never been the one living in the Old Testament, because like having the full complete Bible is like, oh, that's super important, because like there's like, oh yeah, there's a promise of a Savior, But yet, imagine if you're living your time in the book of Isaiah, and it's like
Yeah.
all you have is just these prophets, and you don't have the
You can't like
of the
really
Satan.
communicate with God yourself.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah.
And it's like,
One time a year, the high priest can go into the tab. Yeah.
yeah, I don't have, unfortunately, I don't have any sheep to sacrifice at the moment. So
Oh my gosh. When I read all the different laws that people have to follow in Numbers and Deuteronomy and Leviticus, I was like, wow.
I know for people who have never read Leviticus before, it can feel like you're eating cereal without milk. But man, oh man, if you can start understand the full context of like why the law was created and why Jesus completes the law,
Yeah.
is such a phenomenal thing, because it really shows you that you can't do it on your own, and you can't live a perfect life.
Yeah. Yeah. That's really good. Yeah. And I even loved the detailed nature that it shows of God, like how specific everything
Is.
had to be. Yeah. That was really, really one of my favorite takeaways from reading those books. And one thing too, I'll say on the Old Testament, and then we'll wrap up. But I think reading the book of First Kings, Second Kings, First Chronicles, and First Samuel, Second Samuel, First Kings, and Second Kings. If you've never read the Old Testament, that's where I would recommend starting. Starting with First Samuel, then read Second Samuel, then read First Kings, then read Second Kings. Those books are written like a action movie almost. Like it's all about the story of King David, and I felt God put on my heart to read about David's story 2 years ago, and I started in First Samuel and just seeing the journey of Saul and then David and then Solomon, and how David was chosen to be king after kind of being an afterthought, and he just had this heart for God, and how God looks at someone's heart and doesn't look at the outward appearance, and just all the crazy stuff that happened around the lives of the three of them was just super encouraging to me. So if you've never read it, it's a really easy read too. There's not all this crazy laws and like difficult language to follow. It literally reads like an action movie you'd watch on TV. So I would recommend starting there, and something I don't think I've really talked about or had the opportunity to say on the podcast before. So hopefully that encourages somebody out there that has been wanting to start in the Old Testament and hasn't known where to.
Read your Old Testament, kids. It will fulfill it.
Awesome, Brad. So last thing, and we'll wrap up with this. Something I ask every guy who comes on. Let's say there's single men specifically listening to this episode, and okay, awesome. You're hearing about this guy Brad's story, how he's kind of been in the faith his whole life, and really has understood what Jesus has done for him since high school, and just to see his faithfulness and trusting God with his future and dating. What's like one thing that you want single men specifically to take away from this episode, heading into the weekend, heading into their Friday night, write this down, put this in my journal, in my reminders heading into the weekend.
So yeah, I want you to picture yourself in a scenario like this. Recently, we've had the Olympics, and I want you to say you are on the Olympic track team right now, and I want you to say that finish line is God. I want you to do whatever it takes to run full send at him. I know everybody's got a different circumstance. Some people have sprained legs, and some people have messed up backs, but I want you to give 110% to God and just go full send for him, because if you are pursuing him with everything you have, everything else will follow. He is faithful to you, he loves you, and he will not let you down. Do not let the world tell you otherwise.
Wow. Amazing, Brad. Thank you so much for coming on, and just for being you, like living in who God's called you to be, and just being an encouragement and a force for good in that.
Awesome. I appreciate you having me on. It was an incredible time.
Love it. And cool to see kind of behind the scenes of the podcast here a little bit, huh?
It was. You get the newfound respect for it, and how much hard work this handsome gentleman of your host is doing for you guys.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Brad. Really appreciate your support, and thank you everybody for listening to this week's episode. If you're watching on YouTube, I'd love for you to comment below where you're watching from. Would love to learn a little bit more about you specifically. Thanks so much for tuning in this week. And if you have a friend you think would benefit from hearing Brad's story, I'd love for you to text them the link. We'll see you next Friday with a new episode. Have a great rest of your day. Thanks for listening to this week's episode of the Single Man Podcast. If someone you know would benefit from this week's episode, I'd love for you to text them the link and invite them to listen. You never know how a simple invitation could change someone's life. We'll be back next Friday at noon Eastern, 9 a.m. Pacific, with a new episode. Until then, check out the video version of the podcast on YouTube, and you can engage with us on Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook.